Human trafficking is an awful stain on our society. And even though we don't want to think about it, headline stories on the subject always brings it to the forefront of our minds. But then it got me thinking, how do the traffickers do it? Why do they do it? And how is money linked to it? In today's video, we will be taking a look at what is human trafficking, how money laundering plays its part in human trafficking, and the impact it has on our society. Hello and welcome to another KYC Lookup video where we bring you AML related content to help you enhance your knowledge in the fight against money laundering. Before diving into today's video, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Oh, and don't forget to leave us a comment with any suggested topics you would like us to cover in the future. We also have a special announcement to make, so be sure to watch until the end to find out what it is. So, on to today's video. What is human trafficking? Official definition states that human trafficking is the unlawful act of transporting or coercing people in order to benefit from their work or service, typically in the form of forced labour or sexual exploitation. When thinking of human trafficking, we predominantly think that it happens only to women. In fact, millions of men and children, along with women, are trafficked every year, not only to different parts of the country, but to different places around the world, where they are held against their will for a number of years or for the rest of their lives. What types of trafficking are there? There are different types of human trafficking, but the main ones we hear about are sexual or forced labour. But there are many others that go under the radar and we don't hear about as much. Involuntary domestic servitude, forced criminality, forced marriage, child labour, and organ harvesting are but to name a few, and all as horrendous as the other. Let's take a look at some of them more closely to get a better understanding of what they are. Sexual human trafficking. This is when someone is deceived, coerced, or forced to take part in sexual activity, mostly against their will. A huge case that took part recently, and is still ongoing, is the Jeffrey Epstein case. Jeffrey Epstein was a very wealthy and powerful figure who tricked young girls to come to his home where he would carry out the exploitation. But the abuse was not just subject to his home. He would traffic young girls on his own private plane to different parts of the US and across the world, where not only he would take part in these depraved acts, but many others would take part in them also. Many victims came forward and brought the abuse to light, but before he could be brought to court, Epstein took his own life whilst being held in prison. Forced labour. Forced labour is when someone is forced to work against their will, and most often than not in the worst conditions imaginable. If they are trafficked to another place, all documentation like a passport or ID is taken from them, where they are threatened or even beaten until they carry out the work. Industries most vulnerable to this type of exploitation is manufacturing, construction, agriculture, car washes, brothels, factory work, and hospitality. Involuntary domestic servitude. Migrant workers are particularly vulnerable to this. A victim is promised work with great pay and lodgings in a home, often with a family and far away from their own families. When the worker arrives, they have all their papers and passport taken away, and are forced to work many hours a day with little or no pay. All ties are cut off from their own loved ones, and they are subjected to mistreatment and threats. Child labour. Children can be very susceptible to exploitation, especially when coming from a very poor background and don't have a parent to care for them. In many cases, children are forced into work due to their family members becoming ill or dying. Industries where child labour occurs is agriculture, cotton picking, brick making, the garment industry, sugarcane, tobacco and gold. The countries where this type of labour predominantly happens is Eritrea, Somalia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, Sudan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Zimbabwe and Yemen. Organ harvesting. Organ harvesting is the practice of removing the victim's organs either through torture or coercion. The purpose of removing the organs is to sell them onto prospective buyers at a very high cost, so that the traffickers can make huge profits. Many victims have been left with no medical attention after the procedure, leaving them to get infections or even die. But how is money laundering linked to human trafficking? Human trafficking is big business for the traffickers, and according to International Labour Organization, ILO, approximately $150 billion a year is generated off the backs of victims. $99 billion alone comes from the commercial sexual exploitation. The traffickers will use legitimate businesses like banks to funnel their money through to make it clean, similar to methods used by other criminals such as drug traffickers. One of the main problems that human traffickers face is the movement of cash. They just can't deposit huge amounts of cash into an account without being flagged, so small amounts need to be deposited, below the threshold set within the jurisdiction. For traffickers on a larger scale, shell companies have been known to be used as another way of shifting the money from one place to another. So what are the impacts that human trafficking have on our society? Human trafficking has a devastating effect not only on the victims, but their family and society itself. For the victims, they are deprived of their human rights and their freedom by being subjected to unimaginable abuse like beatings, rape, and threats. This can lead many victims suffering from PTSD, additional mental health issues, and physical problems. But by the stigma of being trafficked, many victims suffer in silence, not seeking the help they need. For their families, the distress of not knowing where their family member is, or if they are alive, is unbearable, and not knowing where to turn for help adds to the torment. But the acts of the traffickers also impacts the safety and security of us all. If these traffickers are allowed to proceed with their crimes, they can infiltrate many industries and generate massive profits for themselves, which keeps the cycle going. It is estimated that around 40 million people are trafficked each year globally. I will repeat again. 40 million people, but this is just an estimate, so numbers could be a lot more. Countries that are reported to have the worst human trafficking are China, Eritrea, Iran, North Korea, Russia, Sudan, Syria, and Venezuela. Countries must do all they can to stop this heinous crime from continuing. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act, TVPA, of 2000 is the first comprehensive federal law to address trafficking in person. The law provides a three-pronged approach that includes prevention, protection, and prosecution. And in May 2020, HHS, which is the US Department of Health and Human Services, announced funds for the Human Trafficking Youth Prevention Education Demonstration Programme, a new grant programme that will provide $3.5 million to local education agencies, working in partnership with a non-profit or non-governmental organisation, to develop and implement programmes to prevent human trafficking. Well, there you have it. What is human trafficking? How money laundering plays its part in human trafficking, and the impact it has on our society. Please tell us in the comments section what human trafficking means to you and what other negative impacts it has on our society. Now for the special announcement mentioned at the start of the video. We are now launching our very own courses for you to take a more in-depth look at a variety of subjects, such as Introduction to AML, Beneficial Ownership, and Customer Risk Rating, for example. So make sure you visit our website for further details, and let us help you connect the dots in KYC. Thank you for watching the video, and if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe to watch more amazing videos.